Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Stefan, and I am one of the co-founders of Gnosis. Those of you who know Gnosis probably associated with like prediction markets, maybe, or Gnosis Safe. But recently, we joined forces, or like we merged together with another team, XDAI, to create Gnosis Chain. And who of you has heard about Gnosis Chain? Wow, I'm impressed. Yeah, this is good news. Even if you have never heard about Gnosis Chain, you might actually have been a user of Gnosis Chain. And this is because many of the applications which are running on top of Gnosis Chain are obfuscating quite well that they're running on Gnosis Chain. To give you a few examples. Do you know this game? Yes, exactly. That's a Dark Forest. If you have played this game, you actually have been a user of Gnosis Chain. Do you know this here? Yeah, exactly. There's a machine right here. If you're minting your POAP using this machine, you actually do a transaction on Gnosis Chain. Do you know this here? Circles? It's like a UBI project. It launched like 1.5 years ago. Like over 200,000 users signed up. Then there were some technical difficulties. That's why I think adoption decreased quite significantly. But we are working on this again to revamp it and make it really successful on Gnosis Chain. Anything that you do here, again, all transactions happen on Gnosis Chain. And I think that's kind of also important for generally infrastructure, right? Like no one goes to a blockchain to use a blockchain. Users come because they want to use a service. And the better we obfuscate the infrastructure below it, the better it is for the user experience. So to tell you a little bit more about Gnosis Chain. So Gnosis Chain is not a new network. It's actually the oldest sidechain to Ethereum, older than Polygon, much older than Binance Smart Chain, kind of the OG-like sidechain to Ethereum. It started in 2018 as a project in Berlin, actually, with a very simple value proposition on Ethereum. Like if you want to use applications that use stable coins, you actually have to use 2 tokens, right? You have to have Ether in order to pay transaction fees, and you have to have a stable coin in order actually to use, like to pay for whatever you want to pay. And in XDAI, that's different. In XDAI, you're actually using DAI, the stablecoin DAI, to pay also for transaction fees. So if you want to build, for example, a point of sale system, it's very easy. You just give a user DAI and he can do whatever he wants. And this was also the kind of most popular application of Gnosis Chain for a while was a burner wallet. Some of you might still know this wallet. It was a very simple browser-based wallet that made onboarding super, super simple. So you could really start onboarding anyone you wanted by just sending them some DAI, and they could start paying for drinks at conferences and so on. So it was really nice. And yeah, and then basically last year, like the XDAI network and Gnosis merged to form what is now called Gnosis Chain. And with this merge, it was not only, this merge was actually kind of novel because it was really only merging the tokens. So we offered the token holders of XDAI to convert their token to GNO tokens. And by doing so, merge those 2 projects. There was actually no lawyer involved at all. So it's really like a Web3 merger, quite unique. And yeah, this happened in last year. And with this, we also wanted to give XDAI a new perspective. Because obviously competition is pretty strong right now, Polygon is pretty strong, and many other sidechains get traction. And so we decided, okay, we changed the technical roadmap of this network. Previously it was running its own like Aura consensus, and we decided to change this and swap it for Ethereum 2 consensus. Yeah, so Ethereum 2 consensus, you know, like finally the merge happened successfully. And we are having actually our own beacon chain running for Gnosis Chain, and the merge is expected to happen very soon. So the Gnosis beacon chain actually launched already last year. It's ongoing, it's working, and very soon it will be merging with the execution layer on Gnosis Chain. So how do we want to position ourselves to Ethereum? So obviously, a lot of use cases have been priced out of Ethereum over the last years, simply because transaction fees were super high. And we see that those applications can actually find a new home on Gnosis Chain, because Gnosis Chain also doubles down on the same values that Ethereum has, specifically decentralization. So if we want to compare Gnosis Chain to other networks, we can actually use this here, the blockchain trilemma. was a term coined by Vitalik and describes that out of 3 desired properties, decentralization, security, and scalability, you can always only focus on 2 of them, and you have to make a compromise on 1 of them. So let's see how this applies to Gnosis chain, starting with decentralization. So we aim to make Gnosis chain actually the most decentralized network. So right now, I think we can say that Ethereum is the most decentralized network, and Bitcoin, obviously, but Gnosis is not doing too badly. Like we see here a list of validators that are actually running Gnosis chain. Again, like this is the Gnosis beacon chain, so we are using the same consensus as Ethereum. And you see, like Ethereum currently has 400,000, Gnosis chain already has 100,000. And given that the beacon chain is pretty new, it's quite impressive. Like, how did we get to those numbers? So we made it super, super simple for everyone to become a validator on this network by acquiring like one of those machines here, like a dEP node. We're actually subsidizing it. So if you want to start validating the network, you can order one, and you get some GNO tokens on top of this, which you can use to participate in staking on the network. The minimum stake is very little. It's only 1 GNO, contrary to 32 Ether, which most people cannot afford, and it's a big limitation to become a validator on Ethereum. In our case, only 1 GNO. It's like $150 or something, and you get the hardware on top for free, and you can start running this network in your office or at home. And by offering this, we got a few hundred people buying nodes and running and validating the network at home. And why is this important? Well, obviously, like the more validators we have, the more independent parties we have in validating the network, the stronger and the more resilient the network actually gets. To make it also less or like more appealing for, let's say, less sophisticated stakers, we also changed other requirements. For example, we don't have like any punishment in case your node goes offline. Like if you go offline on Ethereum, you actually lose money. In case of the Gnosis beacon chain, that's not happening. So if your node goes offline for whatever reason, you will not lose any money. So this is obviously having just a lot of nodes is not the only important thing to create a decentralized network. What's also important is diversity of nodes in terms of where they run geographically, and also under which ISPs they are operated. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create dashboards that track all of those metrics and incentivize users to actually run nodes in different countries, and make sure that they are also using different ISPs and so on to create like a super resilient infrastructure. And this is kind of how it currently actually looks like for Ethereum. So these statistics are not complete by no means, but they give you some understanding of like how decentralized are actually the current networks. And if you look at Ethereum, like it's predominantly actually operated out of US and Europe. And there's some activity in China and a little bit in Australia, but we see that, for example, in South America, there's basically nothing going on. I think there's not even one single node which is here tracked in Colombia, and that's not how it should be. Like if you have actually like a network that should be neutral, we want everyone to participate in it and make sure that it's not biased towards like specific regions. And actually, like I'm coming back to this like in a second, what kind of consequences this has actually. But if you look at Gnosis chain, we also have to honestly say we are still at the very beginning, just being honest about this right now. Obviously, like Gnosis chain is way smaller than Ethereum, and we are in even less countries than Ethereum. But we have the goal and we have the incentives in order to change this. And I think in the next couple of months, you will see how this plays out and that Gnosis chain actually becomes a super decentralized network. So there's a slight downside actually to having, let's say, amateurs like running and operating those nodes, which is they're not always online, and this has some consequence, which is we are missing some blocks. Like you need a certain number of attestations in order to process the block. If some of the nodes are not operating as they should, then we might miss some blocks. But effectively, the only consequence of this is that we are processing some blocks less than Ethereum does, so transaction might be a bit slower in being processed, but it doesn't have any other negative consequence. So it's not really a big deal. And we don't have the situation like in Ethereum where like very few like professional staking companies are actually running the entire show. So why is this important? So it's kind of funny, but many times people ask me a question, why do you focus on decentralization? No one really cares about decentralization. People only care about cheap transaction fees. And so the reason why we focus on this is because we see that there's an abundance actually of cheap transaction space, right? Like you have lots of chains which offer kind of free transactions, like Binance Smart Chain. Polygon is also reasonably cheap. Solana costs almost nothing. But none of them is really decentralized. And most of them actually have very strong centralization forces. And we see their actual decentralized block space is very scarce. And only Ethereum actually offers decentralized block space. And Bitcoin, of course, but with Bitcoin you cannot do that much. And we see already also, even on Ethereum, we see, unfortunately, signs of centralization. So you saw this other diagram before, where are most nodes operating. And recently here my co-founder tweeted that there was a new software upgrade or software being made available called MEV Boost. And what MEV Boost effectively allows you to do as a validator, you outsource the block building process. So you're not collecting transactions and build a block, but you outsource it to a block builder. And there's right now one very dominant block builder, and this block builder kind of applies the OFAC rules that have been imposed. And so if you want to interact with any of the contracts which are on this list of the OFAC, then it will take you a very long time actually to be able to process your block, because most of the validators right now, they just use this block builder. And when they get blocks from this block builder, those transactions will not be included. And the consequence of this is that one of the most important values for Ethereum, which is being a neutral network, is at risk, right? You have now a throttling of transactions for applications which don't comply to what the US says you should do. And that's scary. This is it's a big issue. It's currently being discussed. Many people also don't really see it as an issue. They don't think Ethereum should be even a neutral network. We think we need a neutral network. We don't want to be at the mercy of one specific jurisdiction saying, yeah, you should do this and you should do that. So that's not how a decentralized network should run. But effectively, today, if you operate on Ethereum, most of your transactions will actually be put together by an entity that applies all of those rules. So this is about decentralization. Now let's look at security. And security is actually derived from decentralization. So there's two main attack vectors that you can use in order to take over the network. And the one obvious is you actually have more than 51% of the tokens. Or you're able to attack the operators who are operating the staking services, and by doing this you capture more than 51%. And right now, if we this top graph here is actually Ethereum as it is today, and I think it has been discussed about quite a bit also on Twitter. Right now, you only need 4 entities to collude in order to kind of take over Ethereum. This is Lido and decentralized exchanges Kraken, Binance, and a few other whales. And it doesn't look great. In practice, it's not a super big issue because obviously those companies have amazing OPSEC, so it's very, very unlikely that someone's going to hack all these exchanges and Lido and so on in order to, or the staking providers that work with Lido in order to attack this network. But it's also pretty clear that there's a few points of centralization, especially centralized exchanges, which might be prone to being scrutinized by regulators to apply to whatever they want, especially if you operate in the United States like Coinbase does. So below we see Gnosis chain. Again, there we also see there's similar actually to what we have on Ethereum. We have a liquid staking provider who is owning the majority share. So also there, Gnosis chain we have to work on this. But again, we have the means and we have the incentives in order to diversify it a lot more. And why is this validator network so important? Because we want to use it also to secure the bridges to Ethereum. So everyone, I think at this point, recently I think the Binance bridge was also hacked, right? So we have plenty of hacks that are related to bridges. And they always result in millions and millions of dollars being lost. And so we see the potential to replace the current bridge infrastructure with something that allows us to just validate via light clients how the state of one network is on another. Yeah, and so with this, we are working together with a team from 0xSpark now. They kind of spin off and are creating Succinct Labs to build a trustless bridge between Gnosis chain and Ethereum, validating the beacon chain consensus. And that's a big deal because right now, the Gnosis chain bridge, similar to pretty much every other bridge out there, is a simple multisig where you have a few parties that you have to trust in order to execute your transactions. And that, of course, kind of compromises everything else that is on top of it, simply because, there's very few parties that you have to trust, and that's not how it should be. So by doing this here, by replacing this multisig with a light client, now you have the same trust assumptions as you have with the validator set, like validating the network in general. And until recently, it was seen as being impossible to do this because the consensus of Ethereum is pretty complex. To validate it on another network would be so gas costly that you could simply not do it. Thanks to ZK snarks, now we are able to outsource this computation into a snark to have it at reasonable gas costs. Yeah, and I mentioned right now we have a multisig of 10 parties. If we do this and we operate on this network, then we follow the light client spec of Ethereum, which has always a sync committee of 512 validators shuffled every 256 epochs, which is 27 hours. So we upgrade the multisig of 10 owners to 512 owners, which are shuffled on a daily basis. And so there are two steps to this bridge, which can make this bridge super secure. So I mentioned right now we're focusing on the light client. So what does the light client actually do? The light client verifies that you're on the canonical chain. Yeah, you're following the chain that the validators agreed upon. And if you look at this diagram, this would mean you're operating on version 3 or on block 3 and not on block 3A. What the light client actually does not allow you to verify is that the state transitions are correct. So if all the validators of Gnosis chain or on sync committee collude, they could still steal your money. And that's, of course, also not ideal. So there's another very interesting technology that's being worked on right now, which is called ZK EVM. And what ZK EVM allows you to do is to verify state transitions in the ZK snark. And now, if we marry those two technologies, like a ZK light client with a ZK EVM snark, then we can have actually both. We can validate that the state transition from block 1 to block 2 is correct, and we can validate that the canonical chain actually is 3 and not 3A. And these technologies have huge implications to the security of Gnosis chain, especially if you come from Ethereum. So I think the title of this slide deck is actually Gnosis chain layer 1.5. And we use this term because, obviously Gnosis chain is its own layer 1. But using this bridge, it will have very strong security guarantees. Yeah? So any kind of asset or message that you're going to bridge from Ethereum to Gnosis chain will have the same security assumptions as if you would operate on a layer 2, ZK layer 2 on Ethereum itself. And so now you could ask, okay, why is Gnosis chain not simply a ZK rollup on Ethereum? Well, so ZK rollups are super experimental, and it's very far from being production ready at this point. Whereas with Gnosis chain, we can offer today a highly already diversified and decentralized network with client diversity, where you can operate, and it's only the connection to Ethereum that we'll have to upgrade to get to the same level of security, but you can actually start using this in production right now. So let's look at the last edge here, scalability. And so obviously we kind of already doubled down on decentralization security, so we have to make some compromises similar to Ethereum to scalability. That being said, we have been working with many of the client teams for many years in order to push the limit of what you can do with an EVM blockchain. So specifically, we have been working and supporting the Aragon team, which has been developing the most efficient Ethereum client to allow to have more computational capacity on an EVM network. And so right now, if you look at Ethereum, Ethereum has a gas limit of 30 million, and that's kind of the limit to what you can do right now. With Aragon, we'll be able to increase this to 100 million, which will allow us to have obviously a lot more computational capacity. And this is something that we're going to need because, well, we will have the same approach to scalability actually as Ethereum has. So we are deploying already today layer 2s on top of Gnosis chain to have specific execution environments for applications that need specific parameters. And even today, Optimism, a version of Optimism is running on top of Gnosis chain. Actually, if you're playing this Dark Forest game, if you played the last round, this was actually not played on Gnosis chain directly, but you actually played on Optimism on Gnosis chain. And yeah, we are quite excited about our collaboration with Aragon. So we have a dedicated team at Aragon that does all the optimizations to scale the Gnosis chain. Yeah, and those are kind of the 3 angles of how we see about Gnosis chain. So what can you do today on Gnosis chain? Again, I mentioned there are quite a few applications which became quite popular in terms of identity. We have Circles, UBI, and Proof of Humanity. We have quite a few social apps like PoorUp, GiveF, CLR Fund. We have games. We have oracles. We have some like sports applications like Azuro. And we have a lot of tooling that makes it a lot easier for you to operate your DAOs. So for example, you can have your DAO operating on Gnosis chain and can use a trustless bridge to do interactions on Ethereum. So obviously, like operating DAOs on Ethereum is still, even now, a bit costly. Or you have to be happy or like lucky that no Ponzi scheme is currently doing an airdrop on Ethereum to have cheap gas costs. But yeah, on Gnosis chain, you can have all these cheap transactions while you can still interact with Ethereum trustlessly. And this is enabled by the Zodiac tooling that we have been building around Gnosis safe contracts. So what is coming to Gnosis chain? So of course, we also need a few killer apps in order to lift the entire ecosystem. One application I'm quite excited about, which is coming very soon to Gnosis chain, is a payments protocol, a non-custodial payments protocol that will allow you to spend your crypto that you have on Gnosis chain anywhere where Visa is accepted. And actually, this is kind of the product that we're currently building together with a big fintech company. It looks like a credit card, but it's also a hardware wallet at the same time. And it allows you to sign transactions which are actually sent over the Visa network and then used by an FX to exchange crypto for fiat if the merchants want actually to have fiat. But in the future, it will also allow to bypass this and directly interact with merchants just sending them crypto. So it's like a nice way for you, kind of a nice segue for everyone to start using crypto in your daily life, spending what you have on Gnosis chain, and eventually converting the system into something that is actually running fully on crypto. So if you want to find out more, obviously we are a permissionless network. We would like to work with everyone who wants to build interesting applications. And yeah, you can join our forum. We have an extensive developer documentation, and yeah, we would be happy to have you on as part of our ecosystem. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want to work with us. Thank you.